So, thanks for being here. We're going to talk about burnout, and that's a topic that my wife and I actually wrote a talk about a couple years ago, and things have only progressed since then, right? We first did this talk right before COVID hit, and there's been many stresses to the industry and to the world since then. But what I hope to leave with everyone here are practical, applicable things that you can do right now, today, to help mitigate stress and build up what we call burnout resistance. This is my wife. She sometimes is here to help me do this presentation, but she couldn't make it here today. But I do want to give her credit for being here because she is a PhD professor, researcher. She has been published in A journals, and I'm just a developer who looks up things on Wikipedia and tries to do fancy queries to ChatGPT. But her research mind and her thought leadership is very much in this presentation. And I just want to be clear that while this talk is about burnout, I am so excited about the software industry. I'm sure that, like many of you, you got into this industry because you like building things. And it's just amazing that with very few tools, you can build almost anything from applications that run the federal government to toys or games on mobile phones. And I'm just excited by my career and what I've been able to build by leading teams starting at Accenture when I first joined the industry to working at GitHub today. And in many ways, you have the marketing of the software industry with movies that have been made about founders to these companies that we call FANG being some of the most profitable companies in the entire world. And so there's a lot of excitement about working in tech. However, there's a dark side of working in tech that a lot of people don't talk about. And that's the reality that working in software, it takes a toll. And there are demands on people in our industry that aren't often understood. And that is because even though we don't build buildings, we don't work usually outside, right? Typically we work in well-conditioned environments with chairs that sometimes cost thousands of dollars. And we have very regulated environments and comfortable keyboards and all that. There is a toll that comes with working in the industry. There's the toll of things always changing, right? When I started my career in technology, I'm going to date myself, in 1997, Ruby was like 2 years old, right? It just came out. There are so many frameworks that didn't exist. We did not have Kubernetes. We have virtual machines that we would sometimes have to kind of virtually access. And so there are always these environments and these tools and technologies and frameworks that we had to keep up with. And so that always needing to keep up can be stressful. And it's hard to know, am I still retaining the skills that I need to be successful? And I can tell you, the things that I was working on when I started my career in the 1990s, they just won't cut it today. And so over my career, over my almost quarter century in software development, I've had to always keep up with what's going on. And then there is the notion of always be shipping. I'm sure some of you have heard about that term, that we have to help our teams always ship software. That if we are shipping features to our end users, then we are improving the value of our teams. But the reality is that anything that is always on will fail. And I've seen that in my experience where I've tried to be always on as an engineering manager, as someone who cares deeply about the people that I'm responsible for. Even the manager, even leaders have to take a break. You have to step back to refresh yourself to make sure that you have the reserves in place for when things get hard. And we're working in an industry that's been going through hard times. We've seen layoffs. We've seen companies have massive reductions in revenue and in profitability and in AAR. And so we're going through a tough time now. And if leaders don't have reserves built up to help manage themselves during these hard times, then they will be really hard pressed to manage others. So it's really important that we take time to understand how can we keep fresh? How can we make sure that we have what we need inside to help lead others outside? And that's because when people are burned out, they burn out and they burn down. They often burn down things that are really valuable, and you'll see people who are typically quite happy become cranky. You'll see people withdraw from the team. If you have daily stand-ups, people who are usually talkative stop saying things. Or if you only do your stand-ups via Slack, then you see people literally withdraw from the Slack conversation. And that breaks down the team because teams thrive when communication flows. But burnout is often a blocker to effectively communicating with the team. And so it's really important that as whether you're a manager or individual worker, that you understand burnout and what you can do to build up your resistance. Because while always be shipping is really useful as a phrase, it easily turns into always be slipping as you slip past deadline after deadline because your team is burned out and is unable to foster an environment where they can really do their best work. Now, I'm an old school Scrum Master, right? How many of you have practiced Scrum in your careers? All right, who has not heard of a burn down chart? Oh, you all know what it is. Okay, well, let me just go over it just as a refresher. So a burn down chart is a very simple chart. You have the x-axis, which is time, typically 10 days. I almost always did 2-week sprints, so 10 kind of days in those 2 weeks. And then the y-axis is typically work. And so what you wanted to do is understand what's the unit of work that we have at the beginning of the sprint. And then you wanted to have this ideal line, which is if you burn down the same amount of work every day, then by the end of the time period, you'll have 0 things to do, right? And so as the team works on items in the backlog or in the sprint backlog, ideally, you have the work going down. And so the area that's under the line is the amount of work that's to be done, right? I'm sure that you have all seen this. Now, as a Scrum Master, even now, in the tools that I use as an engineering manager, I'm always obsessing over the burn down chart, right? Because it's a way for me to understand, are we ahead of schedule? Are we behind schedule? How's the team doing? And so I would spend hours and hours and hours looking at burn down charts and trying to figure out where's the work? Where's the team? Are we on track to release this feature? Are we on track to make sure that the things that the marketing department put on the website actually is ready to go by this event? And so as I spent many late nights looking at burn down charts, I realized that there are other things that I needed to burn down. It's not just the work. There are things in my team, there are things in myself that I have to burn down in order to be truly effective. Because over time, as I stressed out over the burn down chart, I realized that there were stresses on my team that were slowing our progress. And so it wasn't just the work, there were other things that were at play. And so I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about burnout, to give you some metrics about how pervasive it is, so that we can understand the problem space, right? You really can't solve a problem until you define it. So when we think about the definition of burnout, right, there's the classical, this came from World Psychiatry, definition of burnout, right? And so I have it up on the screen, but the key terms are overwhelming exhaustion. We're gonna go through these in a slide, but the major components of burnout are exhaustion, cynicism and detachment, and a sense of being ineffective and no longer feeling accomplishment. And maybe even now you think, yeah, there have been times when I've been exhausted, right? I barely can get out of bed. It's not because I'm physically tired, it's because I'm mentally tired from everything that's going on. Or maybe you feel kind of detached from your job because in order to protect yourself, you have to back away from the job a little bit just to survive. And my wife and I took this definition and we boiled it down to a simple phrase, and that is burnout is the ongoing feeling that today's resources aren't enough to meet tomorrow's demands. Has anyone been there, you felt that way? I mean, I can't even keep up with today, let alone tomorrow. So let's dive into these dimensions of burnout. All right, so the first dimension is, again, emotional exhaustion. That's where you have nothing left to give. When you come home from work, that project that your partners asked you to do, not getting done, the things that your kids need your help on, you can barely even spell cat. All the other work that's going on, you just don't have any reserves left to do it, right? So like that's the first category. The first dimension of burnout is emotional exhaustion. You have nothing left to give. Then you have depersonalization, and that's the process of when you unperson people. The example that my wife likes to give is that if you ever go to the hospital because someone maybe got into a car accident and they got injured, and you go to the person at the front desk and you say, hey, what room is my friend in? And they say, oh, the broken arm, they're in room 7. That person doesn't even see your friend as a human being. They see them as a problem to solve. And when you unperson the members of your team, you no longer see them as people that you're working with. You no longer see them as like, these are the people that I'm working with to get things done. You see them as obstacles, or you begin to see them as problems. And it's even easy to depersonalize the users of our systems, where you stop seeing them as people who have insights and needs that we can solve, but as obstacles to getting things done. I, at GitHub, work on a very public program called GitHub Sponsors, and we get feedback from the community about GitHub Sponsors and the things that we do. And so it's really easy to sometimes, especially when you're stressed out, to see those users as people that are against you. When in reality, these are people that we are really tasked to serve. It's our job to make this program work for them. And in many ways, these users are essential to helping us understand product market fit and to continually align the things that we build with the people that we're building it for. And the next dimension is reduce personal accomplishment. That is when the things that you used to really enjoy, you now criticize. You no longer feel joy at landing those PRs or of working on those features, or you don't like working on that part of the code base, or you no longer enjoy even the team ceremonies like planning, and you begin to no longer feel that the things that you do matter. And so those are the 3 dimensions of burnout, and these have a personal cost to the people going through them. But how pervasive really is burnout? Well, Gallup did a survey, and they asked, how often do you feel burned out? And really, the results aren't surprising. 23% of the respondents said that they feel burned out very often or always. And another 44% said that they feel burned out sometimes. And so what that means is that almost 2/3 of full-time workers experience some degree of burnout. So it happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. And there are even corporate costs to burnout. I made this really big, so it almost doesn't fit on the slide, but Harvard Business School found that workplace stress contributed up to 8% of national spending on healthcare. And that's $190 billion, right? These are additional costs that we have to pay as corporations to deal with the health impact of burnout, right? So there are devastating individual aspects and costs to burnout, but there are corporate costs as well. And so it's something that really goes down to corporate dollars. And of course, we do want to make sure that we never lose sight of the people that are being impacted by burnout. But there are expenses that companies have to pay in dealing with a workforce that is burned out, right? So let's talk more about those individual costs. Mayo Clinic found that people who are dealing with stress, people who are dealing with burnout, often have more physical ailments like high blood pressure or fatigue. They have psychological distress. like sadness or even anger. And often they have increased visits to the doctor or to the emergency room, right? So there's actual bodily harm that is being done by burnout. And I've seen people on my teams where when things get stressful, they take on more sick days, right? Which is fine. I mean, that's their right, but there are real impacts to people when it comes to burnout, right? And so if we're going to really solve this, I think that there are things that we can do as, again, engineering leaders, but also as just engineers to help make things better. Now, because burnout's so pervasive, right? We saw that big number in costs, and corporations often want to save costs, and we saw the big hits to the individuals. Then it's not surprising that people, both corporations and individuals, try to solve burnout. But we're going to see that often these efforts aren't fully effective. So we have the example of offices, right? Now, I know with COVID, a lot of people now work from home. I mean, I work from home. I'm fully remote. I have a home office that I work in, but I know that many of you work in the office. And so you probably have seen, offices, and often in tech, we really like to deck out these offices, right? We have games in the game room. We even sometimes have like beer on tap in the break room, and we have people who are doing yoga in the yard, and we have all of these amenities that are meant to help software developers feel like royalty. But sometimes royalty ends up at the red wedding, and then no amount of corporate programs are enough to help you deal with the deep, deep dissatisfaction that comes with burnout. And so again, I think there are so many things that companies can and should do to help their workforce become more resilient when it comes to burnout. But honestly, often these programs are the things that get cut first when things get hard. And we're seeing, and maybe you've seen, programs at work cut. Like we're no longer doing, Taco Tuesday, or we're no longer doing people coming in to give like chair massages. We have chair massages here, which you should take full advantage of, but a lot of companies, they cut those programs. So it's really hard to see these programs as truly being useful when it comes to combating burnout. The corporations, they do their best, but I don't see them as like really a reliable source of really effective burnout prevention methods. And then there are the individual things, right? And I like this picture. I got her. She almost made it off the screen, but right? We often turn to escapism, right? To try to deal with stress. And we book flights to faraway lands or maybe faraway islands, and we want to get around nature, and we try to get away from the things that are causing us stress. But even that becomes stressful, right? You ever heard about people like falling off the Grand Canyon, trying to get the perfect selfie, and we're trying so hard to show how much we're not working, and people are putting themselves in danger doing that. And so escapism, again, has this place. I love a good vacation. I love getting away. But the problem is that you take yourself with you on your vacation. And a lot of the things that you're dealing with, whether it's, hey, our build system is backed up, or we're having issues with quality control, or there's maybe even like corporate issues with, will we be able to continue operating in this way for the near future, right? All those things are waiting for you when you get back. And some people even turn to like abusing food and drugs and things like that. And so those things often are not very effective. And so we see that corporate solutions can only go so far, and individual methods often don't fully solve the problem. And so as my wife and I looked at the research, we wanted to come up with a very simple framework for explaining the burnout problem, but also helping people understand what they can do. And so we called it the Burnout Resistance Framework. And so a big part of this framework is that it had to be simple. It had to be something that people can understand and in daily life operate in. And another thing is that we didn't want to do something that required a lot of privilege, because, we work in tech, right? We work in an industry that often pays higher wages than other sectors of the economy. And so we often have access to money, but sometimes those salaries aren't evenly distributed. And so you see, especially like women and people of color, not often paid the salaries that other people get. And so I wanted, and my wife wanted to make sure that this was a framework that everyone could pick up and everyone can really grok, because it's something that hopefully flows naturally from hopefully just the way that we operate as human beings. And I think like a great metaphor for burnout resistance is like servers, right? And so we all have servers that run the servers that we work on, and often, we outsource these things, at least the hosting, to like AWS or Azure. And so these servers are built to be resilient, right? We talk about availability, we talk about uptime, and we talk about whether it's 5 nines or 7 nines. And so these servers are structured to be able to handle like normal load, that as the number of users that we expect use our system during certain times, we can hopefully predict how well that they will deal with that load. And so in many ways, burnout resistance is increasing and optimizing your availability, right? Your availability to your team, to be able to show up for them, and also your availability for the people that you care about, because being burnout resistant at work results in you being burnout resistant in the other parts of your life. And so I think that that's powerful. That's something that I've seen in my life, that as I become better at managing stress, then I'm a better father, I'm a better son, I'm a better brother. And so there are really large benefits. And so I'm really excited to share with you our framework. So there are 3 parts. I'm going to go through all 3. I'm going to give you really the explanation of that part of the framework. And then I'm going to share with you what my wife and I call the one thing you simply must do, because these are really complicated concepts that we're trying to simplify, but we want to simplify it further and leave you all with things that you can actually do once you leave this session. All right. So the first thing that we need to burn down in order to be more burnout resistant is barriers, or we need to burn down the barriers that separate us. It's become cliche that if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And what that means is that we're built for relationships. Multiple studies have shown that we're social creatures. We thrive on being together. And really one of the challenges of the pandemic was that we were forced to be apart. And so we saw a lot of those social relationships weaken, and we saw a lot of people deal with depression and deal with even like emotional stress because we could not get together. And so as the pandemic has begun to wane, then we're seeing people able to get together. I mean, we're all together right now, right? And so we're able to get back into the social connections that really make us all human. And so it's really vital that if you're a member of a software team, that you burn down the barriers between you and your other teammates. And it's really important that, and this is something that I do as someone who is the Eng manager for a team, is that I really foster open communication. And I do that, one, by modeling the fact that, hey, I want us to work out in the open. My team tries to avoid a lot of private channels. I know in Slack, some teams are different, right? Some teams really lean into private channels, but we really try to work in public, right? We have one main channel, one team channel that's public, that anybody in the company can look at what we're talking about. And that's just a way of signaling that we want to have open communication, right? We want to have an environment where people feel safe to share. And I think that the reason that's important is that if you have a lot of private channels, then people tend to try to problem solve in private. And then what they're learning through solving the problem isn't available to everyone else. So you have often multiple people in private channels working on the same problem, but if you simply worked in public, you're able to get past that. The other thing that I like about public channels is that everyone has a sense of being empowered to add to the conversation. Because if you see people asking questions in public, especially the staff engineers or more experienced people on your team, then that signals to people who are less experienced that this is a safe place to ask questions, right? And so being vulnerable often helps people not feel like they're imposters because they have an understanding that, hey, it's okay to not know everything, because no one knows everything. One of the other things that I try to do as a manager and to help kind of burn down barriers is to simply recognize work, right? People thrive on recognition. And as the manager of my team, in many ways, people see me as the company. So if you're a manager, it's really important that you are monitoring your teams and that you're calling out, hey, so-and-so did really good work creating this, GitHub action that helped solve a problem with our process, or I really like that this person proactively worked on this issue, and I want to recognize them for that. We have something called Sparkle, which is this basically kind of bot that you can sparkle someone, and it keeps like a sum of points. And it's just a way to simply recognize people, right? So simple recognition is often a way to kind of break down barriers, especially if you're making sure that you're equally acknowledging the contributions of others. And so it's really important that we burn down barriers, that as members of teams, that we actively lean into helping each other see each other as co-workers in the work of the team. And really the one thing they simply must do is try to cultivate in-person meetings with someone. Now, hopefully your company lets you do that. I know a lot of companies are remote, and a lot of companies can't travel or can't send people to meet in person. But like in your personal relationship, that you have someone you're meeting in person. Studies have shown that when you meet with people in the same physical space, like your body emits certain hormones and there's certain chemical reactions that don't happen when you're meeting remotely. So it's really important that you find time to meet with someone. And this could be friends from school, or this could be people from other parts of your life. But I really encourage you to find times to meet in the same physical space. We're all doing it here now here at RailsConf, but hopefully this is a regular activity that you all can do. All right, so again, the first thing the first thing we need to burn down to be more burnout resistant is to burn down barriers. All right, the second thing that we need to do is to burn down distractions. Now, we live in an age where we have access to everything. And so that means that we can take work home, right? Back in the day when people worked in factories, like if your job was to build like a Model T, you couldn't take that Model T home, right? Once you left the factory, you were done with work. And then conversely, we can take our entire musical catalog with us to work and just have access to it. And so we have these weakening of lines and separation between work and personal. And that often causes stress because it can easily feel that we're always working. And so that means that it's often hard to say no. It's often hard to say no because there's almost all the time this ongoing and persistent menu of things that can divert our attention. One of the books that I really recommend people who come to this talk is Deep Work by Cal Newport. And Cal does a lot of good work in researching that your attention is finite. You can only focus on a certain number of things in any given time frame. And so if we're working on something at work and we also have articles flying at us on Twitter and we're also having TikTok videos scroll another screen, you are burning your attention. And the problem with that is that you don't have enough attention left over for the things that really matter. So if you're constantly burning down your attention with things that are low value, then you're not able to fully focus and process the things that really do. So that means that it's important to say no. No is a very powerful word, and it's something that can free you to really do the things that really bring value to you. But the reason that this is hard is that often we don't know what's valuable because everything seems valuable, right? The things that my managers is bringing to me, or the things that my coworkers need from me, or the things that I read on Facebook, they all seem equal in value. But it's really important that we take some time and we understand our values, like what's really valuable. And for everyone in here, it's probably not 10 or 12 things, it's probably like 2 or 3 things. And then try to figure out, okay, can I align my attention and my daily work with those things. And so I just want maybe just take some time now, like what's really valuable? Just take some time to think about what are the top 2 or 3 values in my life. Maybe it's your family, or maybe it is your career. Maybe you came from a background where you never thought you could work in software development, right? And so you really want to hone in and take advantage of working in this area, or it could be something else. And then as you go throughout your day, try to figure out what can I do to help align my life with those values. Now, the one thing that you simply must do, because I can give you lots of things to do, but one thing that I'll recommend, and I'll say you can do this on a trial basis, is take a break from social media, right? Get off Twitter, get off Facebook, get off TikTok, get off whatever other social media platforms people are on, and just see that you're gonna have so much of your attention freed up because you're not having it drained by things that don't really add value, right? And so, I mean, and I have people come up to me and say, you know, it's like you asked me to basically stop drinking water by getting off social media. Like, no, it's okay. You can live without social media, maybe do it for a week, but you will be shocked at how much your attention expands simply by doing that. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time in this part of the framework because I think it's super important, because while relationships, and then we'll talk about health, are really important, I really think like the most powerful thing that you can do to be burnout resistant is this: hone your focus. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time with this part of the framework, because often like relationships take time to develop. You can't kind of walk out of the room today and have like a best friend. I don't know, maybe, but it's unlikely. And you can't really, immediately start working on your health usually, but your attention, you can start now. And here's a simple thing that you can do. You can leverage the power of saying no. Because the reality is that if you say yes to almost everything that comes your way, if you say yes to every request, then you're often saying no to the things that you really care about. And so by saying no, you're freeing up yes. And so I wanted to share a couple simple techniques that you can use to say no. Because especially in like American culture, we are people pleasers. We really want to say yes to everything because we want to make sure that the person who's coming to us doesn't feel bad about us, right? So we'll say yes, even when like deep down in the back of our minds, we're like, why did I say yes, right? So like, it's really important that we can use no as the powerful tool that it is, right? So there are a couple of simple techniques that I want to share with you about how to say no. So one is simply to just say, my workload is really heavy, right? Hey, I have a lot on my plate right now. And so I would love to help you with this, but I have these things that I need to work on, right? So by doing that, one, you're showing that you track your workload, you know what you're working on, and you should do this. And they're able to explain that, hey, this thing that you're saying that I should do, it just doesn't fit with like what I'm working on right now. All right, and the other technique is just to stay focused. Hey, at the beginning of this year, I decided to focus on learning another language. And so I can't do that because I have a class to learn Spanish or sign language or something. And so this is something that's really important to me. And so I can't meet your request because this is something that I'm focusing on right now. And by doing that, you're showing that, hey, you have a value that is important to you, and that it's important that you keep your commitment to yourself. And you're also showing that you value, again, yourself as a human being, right? We're also human beings, and we need to embrace our humanity and display our humanity to other people. Second, just say impact. Hey, if I do the thing that you're asking me to do, then this is going to push out the things you've already asked me to do by 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And so often when people come to ask you to do something, they have no idea what you're working on. They don't know what's on your plate, and they don't know the time frame that it's going to take for you to do those things. And so by basically reflecting back the request to them and saying, if I do this, this is the impact, then you're helping them understand, oh, this is why really this person shouldn't do this. And the other tip is just what I call castle, right? So in chess, those of you who play chess, there's a kind of a swap that you do between two pieces where they swap places. And so what you can say is that, I can't do this, but I can do that. And you can say, hey, this thing that you're asking me to do, I can't do this. I can't refactor this part of the code base, but hey, I can work on this function. Or, I can't write up the notes from this meeting, but I have a recording that, I made that I can upload to the system and make available to everyone who went to the meeting, right? So just offer some alternative by doing that. So by doing that, by following these tips, you'll be able to hone the power of no and also help people know more about you in the process. All right, the other thing is going to sound weird, but chew your food. Chew your food. Studies have shown that the number of times that people should chew your food, like every bite, and I know this is going to sound wild, y'all, is 32 times. That you should chew every piece of food 32 times. So I know that that's probably too much for most people, but let's go with 10, right? And the reason that this is a focus thing is that so many times we rush through eating, right? I have had meals that I don't even remember eating because I was rushing through it. And so by slowing down, chewing your food, one, you get more nutrition from the food because you break it down more. It's easier to digest because again, you're chewing it, but you're also taking the time to just enjoy the act of eating, right? Eating can be a focus time. I know when I've done this, there are like ingredients that I didn't even know was in something that I've eaten like over and over again. Like, oh, there's like cinnamon in this, but I didn't know because like I was rushing through it. And so by chewing your food, you're able to have more nutrition, but also it can be a way to focus on that task. You can actually take time to just hone your attention that way. So we're scheduled to have lunch later on today, so all of you can try this when you have lunch later on. All right. And again, I just want to say one more thing, that being present is really important. And so this is also a being present in the moment activity. All right. So the final part of the framework is what we call burning down illness. Now, we all walk around in physical bodies. And the health of our bodies are an important part of how we deal with stress, right? The benefit of being healthier is that you're enabling your body to better withstand the stress of life, right? And I know that people may have like chronic conditions that you have to manage, or there's something that that you really, maybe you can't exercise because of that. I've had people come up to me and say, well, I have this thing where like my health is basically always at this level. It's not going to, get tremendously better if I start going to the gym or working out. And I totally get that, but I think that we can all be healthier versions of ourselves, right? I'm not saying that we all need to become bodybuilders or we need to start doing like the Ironman competition, but it's really just being intentional in our health, right? And it's the basics. It's getting enough sleep. How many of you feel that you get enough sleep every night? All right, a few hands, right? Not very many. The majority say no. It's just something that we really have to do, and it's one thing that we can really control. My wife and I have invested a lot in our sleep, right? We lowered the temperature in our room to be about like 68 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Because we find that our sleep is better. We have a weighted blanket that we purchased a couple years ago. We have fans that run to have like white noise, right? We really invest in our sleep, and it's gotten better. And I find that when I am rested enough, then like my ability to focus goes up, my ability to solve problems goes up, right? I work at a software company, right? I solve problems every day. Why would I not optimize my problem solving capability, right? That's just really, really important, but it's something that we often neglect. And so getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, right? Like these are simple things that we all know that we should do, but they're critical to helping us become able to mitigate the effect of stress and to avoid burnout. So, and again, the one thing that you simply must do is get enough sleep. You gotta sleep anyway. Your body's gonna eventually make you go to sleep. So you might as well optimize that experience. All right. So I also want to go over the concept of the ideal line. And what I mean by that is in the burn down chart, you have this ideal line, right? And it represents perfection. And I think it's important to look at the line because it gives you a sense of like, are we on schedule? But one thing I learned by working with Scrum teams and software teams is that if we're above the line for a little bit, that's okay, right? Because I understand that my team has a certain tolerance level where we can recover. And I bring this up because over time, as you use this framework, there will be times where your relationships aren't as great as they could be, or you're not able to focus because there's just a lot going on, or maybe you're not able to be as healthy as you want to be. Maybe you're not getting a lot of sleep because you have a tight deadline, right? All that happens, but the key thing is not to be perfect. The key is to take time to inspect yourself, right? If you've done Agile or Scrum, you know the concept of a retrospective. And it's really important to just check in with yourself, right? Retrospectives aren't just for software teams, they're for you too. And you can say, okay, how am I doing with my relationships right now? This could be weekly, could be bi-weekly, could be monthly, but it's really important that you check in with yourself and see, how are my relationships? How's my focus? Am I diverting my attention to things that are really low value? And how am I doing with my health? Have I drinking enough water? Am I getting enough sleep, right? These are all really critical things that can help us become more burnout resistant, right? So it's really important that we do that. Now, I do want to talk about a couple of things because sometimes people say, hey, Anwan, great talk, but like I have very low resources. I'm extremely busy. I don't have time to meet with like friends and do all these things. What are some of the really simple kind of cheat codes for this? So I'm gonna give you some cheat codes. One, volunteering is a great cheat code, right? One, you're meeting people who share a passion that you probably have too. Three, you're making a contribution to usually a really good cause. And then three, you're forming relationships with people, right? And these are all just almost built in, right? So volunteering is really a very simple way to form relationships. Then journaling, right? So maybe you're really busy, but if you can take like 10 minutes a day to just write down your thoughts, right? The process of writing down your thoughts helps you to process those thoughts and get them out of your head. I've kept journals for 25 years. And one of the powerful things of keeping a journal is that I can read it. And you know, this is probably like 10 or 12 years later. And like I see like, wow, so many of the things that I was worried about 12 years ago never even happened. And so that helps me think that maybe the things that I'm worried about now maybe aren't worth worrying about, right? So journaling is a really powerful tool to harness your attention and your focus. And then finally, take a walk. If you can't go to the gym or if you can't do some regular exercise, just taking some time to just walk around the block. If you live in an area where you can walk around safely outside, highly recommend it. My wife and I take a walk almost every day after we have dinner. And it's time for us to connect. It's time for us to just get the blood flowing, to get some sunshine, get some vitamin D. And we find that our stress levels have gone down, right? If we don't take that daily walk, then we find that we're usually getting more cranky toward each other, right? So that's the framework, right? Relationships, attention, health, right? If you can work on those three areas, you will find yourself being more burnout resistant. And the reason that I'm so passionate about this, y'all, especially as a manager, is that I find that if I model stress management, if I walk in these things, my team sees that. They pick it up, right? If I take time off, right? I know a lot of managers feel that they have to always be at work, but by doing that, you're modeling to your team, don't take time off. No, you need to take vacation, especially if you're a leader on your team. If you model healthy habits, if you model focus, if you block out time on your calendar, you can say this is focus time, this is think time. You're modeling to the people that you lead that attention matters. So I'm rooting for you. My wife and I are rooting for you as you walk in this framework, build burnout resistant, and present the best version of yourself to the people at work and the people that you care about. Thank you.